Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first edition of Time About the Movies, which is a show where we're going to take a look at, we're going to talk about a lot of movies on here, but we're going to talk about movies that have come out during a specific week. We're going to start all the way back to the week I was born, which was Tuesday, January 10th of 1989, and we're going to go from there, and we're going to continue on all the way to present day. So this is going to be a continuing series where I give you like mini reviews of the top 10 movies at the box office for this particular week, because this is a new show, so this is going to be the longest one. But every week we're going to talk about the newest releases that come out each particular week. So next week we'll talk about the movies that came out the weekend of January 20th of '89, the 27th the next week, and so on and so forth. And we'll see how this goes. Hopefully we can make this a recurring thing. I don't know if I'm going to do this weekly or bi-weekly yet. This is still kind of in the testing phases, so like I said, this is going to be the longest video of the series so far, most likely because we're going to be talking about more than just a couple of movies. We're going to be talking about the top 10 in particular. So, without further ado, let's get right to it. Let's go back to January 13th, 1989, and take a look at what the top movie at the box office was that weekend, and that was the movie that would eventually win Best Picture that year, Rain Man. You know, while the idea of Tom Cruise and Dustin Hoffman playing brothers is kind of a little off-putting because obviously Tom Cruise is a lot younger than Dustin Hoffman is, these two really work off each other very well. I think this movie is a really well-done movie. It's one of Barry Levinson's best movies. And like I said, the chemistry between Tom Cruise and Dustin Hoffman is very good. You can see why Dustin Hoffman won Best Actor for this performance. He does a very good job in this movie playing an autistic man who's just trying to connect with his brother and try to just get through this crazy world that we're living in. And like I said, both him and Tom Cruise, they're great together. Their chemistry is very good. Just a great movie overall. I really have no complaints about this one. Just a great, great movie. So moving on to the second highest grossing movie that weekend, which is now, this was a real test for Ivan Reitman at the time, because shortly after Ghostbusters came out 4 years prior to this, he did a movie called Legal Eagles 2 years prior to this, which was more of a comedic drama in a way. It's a very mixed bag, but honestly, I think that movie's actually pretty decent. It's got Robert Redford, Deborah Winger, and Dale Hannah in it. Recommend checking it out, but it was not a big commercial hit at the box office. But Twins was a huge hit at the box office for obvious reasons, because Arnold Schwarzenegger was the biggest star at the time. Danny DeVito was a respected, and he's still a respected actor, but seeing these two working off each other in this movie that is so ridiculous, but it's also really smart at the same time, you can't help but love it. Twins is a great comedy classic, a great Ivan Reitman movie, and I'm curious to see what happens now with this Triplets movie that they were going to make, because apparently they were already planning on starting to shoot it soon, but now that Ivan Reitman sadly is no longer with us, the future of that film is kind of in doubt. I mean, personally, I have a thing against comedy sequels coming way after the original film was released, but we'll be interested to see what happens with that regardless. Rest in peace, Ivan Reitman. So let's move on to the third highest grossing film of the weekend, which was Beaches. Of course, this film is most notable for its soundtrack, which includes such songs as Wind Beneath My Wings, along with some other songs from Bette Midler. And Bette Midler is always fun to watch in movies, and I think she gives a good performance in this. I like Barbara Hershey a lot in this. The movie itself is just okay. I think it's one of the definitions of a pure melodramatic type of movie. Like, there's a lot of moments in this where they're trying a little too hard for the tear-jerker moments, the emotional moments, and most of it doesn't really work all that well, but it's great seeing these two actresses working off each other, and I think it works enough on its own to watch maybe once in a while as a rental. I personally don't like it as much as most people do, but that's just my theory on it. Just something I'm not the biggest fan of. So anyway, let's move on to the fourth film, highest grossing film this weekend, which was The Accidental Tourist, which features William Hurt, Kathleen Turner, and Gina Davis in a role that won her a Best Supporting Actress Academy Award. Sorry, I just had to double check to make sure I was right on that. But yes, Gina Davis did win Best Supporting Actress that year for this movie. And It's a pretty decent film. I won't say it's a classic movie. It's directed by Lawrence Kasdan. Lawrence Kasdan was also best known for directing The Big Chill. He also did Body Heat, which coincidentally starred William Hurt and Kathleen Turner in it. And overall, it's a pretty good movie. I wouldn't say it's one of his best movies, but it has enough good performances, enough to recommend it as maybe a one-time watch if you want to look for something really enjoyable. If you want to look for something to watch from the past that's actually kind of decent, I wouldn't say it's one of his best films, but it's still a pretty decent film overall. Now, this next film I think is a classic. Working Girl is from Mike Nichols. Mike Nichols also made The Graduate. Features a great cast, including Harrison Ford, Sigourney Weaver, Melanie Griffith, Joan Cusack is in this, a young Kevin Spacey is in this movie. The music by Carly Simon. That great opening with the flyby of the Statue of Liberty, and it's just a great movie overall. Very funny movie, great romantic comedy drama, and a lot of people don't really talk about this movie as much as I think they should, but it's definitely a great movie overall. I think it's a really well-made film. Definitely check this one out. I was lucky enough to watch this again on TV not too long ago to really get back into how much I really enjoyed this movie, and I can't recommend this movie enough. Definitely check out Working Girl if you can. So, anyway, on to the next movie. And speaking of great movies, what more do I need to say about The Naked Gun from the Files of Police Squad? You know, everyone loves Airplane. Airplane's a great movie. I love it as well. Naked Gun is my favorite spoof comedy of all time. The Naked Gun trilogy is one of my favorite spoof comedies of all time. I mean, these movies are just hilarious. They're just a ton of fun all around. The first movie, of course, is a classic. Got Leslie Nielsen, Priscilla Presley, Ricardo Montalban, George Kennedy, O.J. Simpson, Reggie Jackson getting tumbled over at the baseball game. Just a fun movie all around. Every time I watch it, I laugh long and hard. Classic David Zucker comedy. Just a wonderful, wonderful movie. Can't recommend this one enough. Naked Gun from the Files of Police Squad. Classic movie. On to the next film. Yeah, Mississippi Burning is another one of those movies that's really style over substance. Like, there's definitely a lot of elements in there that are actually pretty decent. The acting by Gene Hackman, Willem Dafoe, Frances McDormand, Stephen Tobolowsky is great, but not one of the better movies overall, basing on this particular subject. Like, I think there are much better movies that handle the subject matter better than what this movie does. It's not a bad movie overall, but it honestly could have been a lot better than what it actually was. So I wouldn't say it's one of the best movies from that year that came out, but the year of '88, I mean. But overall, decent film, not one of the better films, but could have been a whole lot better. So, on to the next. Yeah, apparently 1989 was the year of underwater themed movies because you had this, you had Leviathan, you had The Abyss. Needless to say, DeepStar 6 was not one of the better films. I mean, for one thing, it's opening in January, so that should tell you a whole lot there. But yeah, this is just another generic alien ripoff, except for the fact that it's taking place underwater. It's this whole idea that space creatures had somehow landed underwater, and it's just not a good movie. There are some elements in there that are kind of interesting, but it's just a ripoff of what Ridley Scott and James Cameron did with the Alien movies prior to that. So this one came and went pretty quickly, and something that was promoted as a film from the creator of Friday the 13th. This is definitely one of those weaker films that most people seem to forget about pretty quickly. So yeah, Deep Star 6 came and went, and you can kind of see why. So let's move on to the next film. This was a time for pretty good comedies. Here's another great one. Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, Steve Martin, Michael Caine, directed by Frank Oz. Just a phenomenal comedy. Really hilarious stuff. Glenn Heady is also very good in this. And like I said, it's just a really funny movie. Really well-made film. And pretty good, like I said, pretty good year for comedies in 1988 because you had this, you had Scrooge, you had Twins, you had Roger Rabbit, you had Fish Called Wanda. Just a great year for comedies, and this movie perfectly caps off a pretty good year for comedy. Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, can't recommend this one enough as well. Basically the penultimate film before Disney began its second animation renaissance with The Little Mermaid the following year. Oliver and Company doesn't get talked about a whole lot, but it's a pretty fun movie. I think it's a well-made film. I think it got overshadowed by the much better film that came out that same weekend, which was The Land Before Time, which I think is the far superior film. But Oliver and Company is a ton of fun. I like the animation a lot. The voice work is very well done. The music is great. Like, once you hear Why Should I Worry, you'll never get it out of your head. And the animation's just great. The villain's kind of generic, but he has a pretty badass death scene at the end of the film. But it's a great movie. I've really enjoyed Oliver and Company a lot. I think it's a really good movie. I think it's definitely one of the more underrated Disney films, in my opinion. So that's my thoughts on Oliver and Company, and that's pretty much the top 10 for that weekend. But there were some other films that came out of that weekend that are very notable, such as The January Man. Here's one of those movies where you have so much going for it, and yet in the end, it doesn't really all add up. I mean, the producer of this is Norman Jewison, who also was the director of Moonstruck from a couple years prior. The writer of Moonstruck, John Patrick Shanley, wrote this. Kevin Kline, who would win an Oscar for A Fish Called Wanda that year. Susan Sarandon, Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, Harvey Keitel, Danny Aiello, Rod Steiger, Alan Rickman, all in this movie. And it's just, it doesn't really know what it wants to be. It has a hard time figuring out what kind of a movie it wants to be. Does it want to be a straight-up comedy? Does it want to be a romantic comedy? Does it want to be a serious comedy? Does it want to be like an action comedy? Like, you can't really tell what it's trying to do, and I think it really doesn't work all the way through. I think it's one of those movies that if they had more time to work on it, maybe they would have had something, but other than that, this is kind of a really dull movie. Yeah, this is one of those weird movies that really took me by surprise. Like, it's interesting when you watch this movie and you see all these people that will eventually become future stars, like Christian Slater is in this movie. Uh, One of the guys who would create Yo Gabba Gabba later on and was the lead singer of the Aquabats is in this movie. Tony Hawk is in this movie. It's not a great movie overall, but there are still a lot of those little fun elements in there that kind of make this kind of fun in its own unique kind of way. It's not really a night. It's like it's definitely a late 80s type of movie where it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but some of the stuff that, when it really does work, it's actually kind of fun to watch. This one took me a little bit by surprise the first time I saw it, so yeah, this is not a great movie overall, but I do think it has a little bit of those elements that make it a little bit much better than I think it has any right to be. Now, there was one more movie on here that I wanted to talk about, The Experts, but I couldn't find a trailer for it anywhere, even though I have seen a trailer for it. It's a lesser comedy with John Travolta in it. I'll try to have it for you for the next episode, because there's not really a whole lot else coming out the week after that's worth talking about. Maybe two movies in total, so I'll just put that in there with the one for next week. But there you go. That's the first edition of Time About the Movies. Like I said, this may not be a weekly thing. We might do this every couple of days because I want to get through as many weeks as we can. But let me know what you guys think about this. Put your thoughts down below on what you think of the movies that I talked about. And hope you enjoyed this. So I'll see you guys for the next episode. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time. So take care.